Okay, good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well.
Should we go round up some people from the courtyard?
Let's go. Yeah.
Can hawk the.
You have any friends or colleagues here? You can text them. Say it's happening in Haas. This is where you need to be.
This is the place.
This is where you need to be. Leave the session you're in. Come here. Okay. No, seriously. Thank you for joining us. So, is it ringing a little bit, or is it just me? It sounds okay? Okay, all right. It sounded like it was ringing, so okay, all right, good. Let's get started. This is really going to be an awesome. I say this every time I moderate, whether it's this panel or another panel. I feel like, wow, I have the best group of panelists ever, and then the next panel takes it up another notch. So I'm really
This is your last panel then.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. No, this is really an amazing group, and you're in for a real treat because we're here to talk about the name of this panel doesn't change, but the industry does change, and trends and what's happening, super dynamic as we all know, and this the group of panelists that are joining me here on stage just bring some amazing insights and are involved in everything from you're going to hear what they're involved in, so I won't set it up. But my name is Mark Donegan, and I lead marketing for a company called Beamer. Our participation is in video delivery, namely compression. So we work with companies like Netflix. If you look at any of their 4K HDR content, that's been encoded with our technology. And so we're very involved in this whole, shall we say, next generation of TV entertainment experiences. And with that, I've asked each of the panelists to introduce themselves and give a short 3 to 5 minute intro about what they're thinking about, what their respective companies and organizations are looking at in terms of what's happening in entertainment services. So Nick, I guess we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mark. Nick Colsey, business development for Sony Electronics, primarily working on TV products, TV hardware. So this is an exciting time for that industry, for the TV industry as a whole, content and electronics. It's been almost exactly 10 years since I helped launch the first smart TVs. And over that time, we've seen dramatic transition in how television entertainment is consumed, moving from predominantly live viewing and a little bit of DVR to many hours per day on OTT internet-based services. A decline in MVPD subscribers, an increase in OTT, SVOD subscribers, Netflix being bigger than many TV channels in terms of subscription, and a recent increase in the cord-cutting trend to be something really significant. So all of those things are what we as a TV manufacturer think about, how those trends impact the types of TVs that we design and sell, whether that be internet capability, 4K, VR, all those trends. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, my name is Eric Gramberg. I'm head of the product management for Ericsson at the MediaFirst Group. So though Ericsson's dominant business is in wireless and telecommunications, and you may not know this, but 60% of the LTE radios out there in the base stations are Ericsson radios. 40% of them we operate for carriers, the major carriers in the U.S. as well as other places in the world. So we dominate in that area. And we're, of course, as Jim, we were talking earlier about 5G rollout, and we're helping all of our customers here in the U.S. roll out 5G radios. A lot of interesting things to talk about with that. My group, though, is a different group. We're in the video business, and we provide all the TV platforms for major operators around the world for MVPDs. So like AT&T, Deutsche Telekom, Charter, Time Warner, what have you. We provide either whole platform solutions or components of those solutions that they deploy out. So that's what my group is, what we do. We provide sort of the end-to-end. At one end, and sorry to compete with you, Mark, a little bit on that, we do have a lot of compression or encoder technology that are used, dominate in the broadcast world, but also for VOD and on-demand content as well. And then the whole video delivery chain from operator CDNs, origins, all those packagers, all those pieces. We provide from a media delivery point of view. And then we also provide the top layer back-end services that create the set-top box experiences or the tablet experiences or the phone experiences that you have that deliver that high-quality premium video, 4K HDR, moving on to HK, which is what Nick and I were talking about earlier. All those pieces sort of are realized then by that back end that controls, authenticates it, keeps it secure, allows the operator to program it and everything like that. So I think maybe what we'll talk about here is a bit of how we're helping to transform the industry by moving them onto modern technologies, so that way they can not just get it out on all these devices, but they can start to segment and personalize to people and really sort of fulfill the individual's desire of how they want to consume TV.
Good afternoon. My name is Josette Bonte. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and the Head of Research at the USC Institute for Communication Technology Management. It's a mouthful. We call it the CTM. So the CTM is industry-facing, and we like to think that it is halfway between Silicon Valley and Hollywood in terms of the research that it does. So we put out a number of strategic research programs that are continuous throughout the year for the benefit of our clients, who are the large technology companies like Cisco, Ericsson, Nokia, etc., as well as the operators, BT, AT&T, Verizon, Time Warner, but also the Hollywood studios. So it's an interesting mix to serve. Right. So among our research programs, we have several concurrently running on the Internet of Things, including one that addresses the issue of immersive entertainment, as in always present entertainment, not as in VR and AR, and one on the future of media that I'm particularly fond of because of my merged background in the world of telecom, technology, and telecommunications. So that one is in its fourth year, and we are currently, again, dissecting the evolving revenue models for the industry across the board. We do this via primary research, focus groups, but also via financial analyses, as well as secondary research. So that is what I will be talking about later today as it pertains to this panel. Now, we were asked by Mark to also say a few words about our perception of the industry that we're in today. So I put it to you that we have entered a world of maximum fragmentation. However, what we see on the horizon is a possibility for the players to settle a little bit and re-aggregate in a form that might not be what was there, let's say, 3 years ago. So it's a very interesting time to be looking at this industry and to be working in this industry if you're nimble enough to seize the opportunities.
I always hate following Josette because she makes English sound so much better than me. My name's Jim Berger. I'm the comic relief. No, I'm a partner. I'm a partner in the law firm of Thompson Coburn in Washington, a city which many of you know nothing ever happens. Interesting. I have a deep background in the sense of I was with Apple for 10 years in their law department, and I've been representing little IT companies like Microsoft and Intel and Apple in negotiation with the studios, and you know some of this on content, media delivery, and protection. So I play an engineer on daytime TV. I've kind of followed this area closely for now a couple decades, and I sort of am ambivalent. At one hand, I'm a cheerleader, and the other hand, I'm a skeptic. And I'm still, on some of these technologies, I'm really excited about. Eric mentioned 5G. I really am hoping that's going to work the way it's been touted. On others, and probably the wrong venue to say this, I'm a little bit skeptical about AR, VR in the near term. Long term, near term, I think it's a great niche product for training. Anybody who's got to wear a helmet in what they do, VR is, I think, great. Ultimately, as a immersive technology for media, I'm still a little bit skeptical of it. I think, when we get really even more powerful, less energy consuming, see, you can tell I come from the tech side, chips in your glasses that it's just like this, and there's no cable hanging from you to a big hunkin' PC. And then it could be a very interesting entertainment device. At the moment, I'm more in the training. I think it's interesting where television is going in terms of its quality. I'm not as excited yet about 4K, 8K, 16K. I'm very excited about HDR, high dynamic range, which is going to let you see as close as we can get almost. Maybe there's another 10% we can go, but it's going to increase the color space. As I was saying on the last panel I moderated, if you ever look at a sunset on a current HD TV, you'll notice there's banding because it can't reproduce all those colors. That's really going to make for a much more immersive experience just right there. Some people actually complain they think they're looking through a window. But so I'm at the one hand excited, and the other hand a little skeptical. And Mark will make me talk about the government, which I try not to.
Oh, yes. We're going to get to network neutrality.
I mean, I just live there. What can I say?
Not to blame.
And I'm Jonathan Hurd, a director at Altman Villandry and Company. We're a strategy consulting firm with 120 people, offices in Boston, New York, and San Francisco. And the work that I've been doing lately is around understanding the impact of skinny bundles and virtual MVPDs, in other words, internet-delivered live TV service. We saw that about a year ago, or even more than a year ago, that there was going to be this trend to new entrants, to players like PlayStation Vue, Sling TV. Now we've got YouTube TV, Hulu with live channels, and DirecTV Now. All these entrants that have live TV that you can get over the internet. We saw this was coming, and so every summer for the past 7 years, we've done a consumer video survey that is self-funded, where we make the results available to our clients and others. And we decided last summer to focus it on being able to predict the consumer adoption of these virtual MVPD and traditional MVPD services. So we're not really a research firm per se, because we don't sell research. We do strategy projects, pricing strategy, customer segmentation, new business creation. But because of this, the importance of some of the trends in video especially, we want to be able to go deep on consumer video adoption. So that's an area that I look forward to talking about on the panel.
That's right. It's awesome. Well, what did I tell you? It's just an amazing group here. So I want to start with this question. I find it's helpful, sometimes to define what we're talking about. And I'm taking inspiration from the title of the panel, Delivering the Ultimate TV Experience, Broadcast, Cable, Premium, OTT, and I don't know, I think there's MVPD and there's some other stuff in there. Anyway, it implies ultimate. It implies there's a winner. Right? It implies that out of that list, like one is the ultimate, and everything else is kind of, second place or third. I personally don't believe that, but I'm curious, and I'm throwing the question out. First one to grab it can respond, and then I'd like everybody to get a chance to play on this. But in your view, what does define a next generation TV experience? It's a very open-ended question because
Since I'm the least
curious.
Qualified,
Start,
but I'm a lawyer, so I got to talk. No, I think that it's, for me, the most important next generation ain't going to happen for a while. But what I want discovery. I want to be able to find stuff. I mean, right now I've got a certain MVPD that's supplying me with 400 channels, and I can't find anything.
400 channels and nothing to watch, right?
You add Netflix to that. You add all of the possible OTT providers that I love watching some of the shorts, but it takes me forever to find anything that's interesting. You go to YouTube, right, and it's sort of got you classified. It's trying to do it, but it just doesn't make it happen. So that to me is next generation TV. There's a bunch of other great technological stuff, but to me that's the ultimate. I want Watson in my pocket.
Okay.
So I'll go back to one of the things I threw out in my intro, and that is that for me, it's the personalized experience. In other words, your TV. So it's not just putting the content that you care about, but which is an important piece of it, but also in the way that you want to consume it. Okay, the way that you want to navigate it and find it. You know, it goes back to what you're talking about, segmentation. Know your market, know your segments, define them, and then create an experience appropriate for them. And be dynamic. Allow that consumer to then change it and adapt it to them. You know, use data wisely. You know, to me, that's the ultimate experience. It's truly personalized. So that way, each one of us really have our own TV experience, and it's going to be different on here than it is on that TV and the tablet and everything like that as well. And it knows that.
And one of the factors there, the easiest way to think about segmentation based on research, you know, you can look at it by income or technological, being advanced or whatever, but it's hard to find those people. But age range is just remarkable how different, under 35s use TV versus over 35s. And the preference, we asked in our research, which form of video do you use when you don't have a plan for what you're going to watch? And we said online sources or your pay TV operator. And more than 50% of those under 35 said online sources. And older respondents, overwhelmingly, like 55 plus, 80% of them said their cable TV operator. So to your point about understanding segments, there is no one ultimate TV experience. And some of the best innovations are ones where through one remote, for example, you could use it in multiple ways, either in a traditional way or speak into it. And so it's, coming up with ways to appeal to multiple segments at the same time is actually a really critical success factor.
So to piggyback on that thought on demographics, so we do a lot of primary research with millennials. And we found that the sweet spot for advertisers and for everybody else seems to be right now the older millennial, aged 25 to 34. Why? Because this constituency is actually still young enough that they were raised with different ways of consuming media, but they are also young parents now, so they have different needs. So for them, must-see TV is really where and when they want it, right? So they consume TV differently, certainly from my generation, or any other generation from that matter. And OTT is becoming the very prime way that they consume TV. So that's really their TV, their mainstay, right? Broadcast and cable TV, based on our focus group, are just passive entertainment, and more often than not, just background. Just the one first layer of the experience upon which they add second screens, but we could probably pick up that thought later.
Yeah, I guess looking from a TV manufacturer's perspective, a couple of points. I think 10 years ago, people who were looking towards the future of TV entertainment were saying, well, the TV set's going to go away. People will be watching all this content on mobile devices, and that's certainly true up to a point, but it hasn't replaced or supplanted the need for a big, high-quality screen in the home. Nobody's going to gather around a tablet to watch the Super Bowl. It just doesn't. It's not in the nature of the entertainment medium to do that. So all the things that the other panelists have said are very valid in terms of discovery. The smart TV has led to an explosion of content. Maybe the ability of the TV to discover content that you want hasn't kept up with that, but. And there's a lot of companies, we work with Google as one example. We have all of the kind of the power of Google search behind the search functionality of the TV. So that's kind of our statement on that. But at the end of the day, what people, the primary reason for buying a new TV, a primary selection factor is picture quality. So, this is really what's driven the transition from HD to 4K, and will drive kind of future picture quality developments as well, like HDR and 8K.
So this is, you said something very interesting, Josette, that I want to jump on and get your reaction and others. You said that sort of the traditional, cable is in the background, and I'm speaking of for millennials and younger generation, right? And yet, what's the difference between watching ABC on Comcast and watching ABC on Sling?
Not much if you're choosing that example.
So I guess where I'm going with that, to, unpack that a bit more, is that, Hulu's new live service, Sling, these are right, next generation, this is super exciting, right? And yet,
Yeah, but,
it's streaming over the internet versus cable delivery, but it's the same thing,
No,
right?
but it isn't in one sense. In one sense.
Tell us.
And we were having this discussion earlier. An earlier panel I did was who's indie TV. I think the difference is they're now not competing with the other networks. They're now competing with everything else that's OTT. So they've all of a sudden become an indie on there, and they've got to fight to get that younger generation, the millennials, the Gen Zs, they got to fight to get their attention with a whole bunch of other stuff that they find most interesting. Tune to the any of the network news, national, like Lester Holt. Look at the commercials. They tell you who's watching that. That's not going to appeal as an OTT, whether it's Sling or however else they deliver it OTT. They have a different set of competitors. So,
Right,
Well-
the consumer doesn't really care at the end of the day. I mean, what they're looking at are price points as well. So, and Jonathan has been doing some very specific research on that, so we'll be able to talk about skinny bundles as well, I'm sure. But we've done our own skinny bundle research. And, this phenomenon, skinny bundles, by the way, another industry term for when an MVPD decides to put together a limited number of channels and offer them either via their facilities-based typical cable network, or as is the case for Sling and DirecTV Now, over broadband as opposed to via the satellite system, right? So, and then, YouTube TV is in that category, Hulu, just to set the parameters and define what we're talking about, Hulu TV. Okay, so we're dealing with this new breed of entrants. So what is the difference? Well, typically there is a difference in the sense that the bundle is offered for a very attractive price. And our millennials are responding to that because it complements very nicely whatever they typically have, which is a Netflix subscription or Hulu subscription, or a little bit of other stuff that they accumulate a la carte, and then they add, for a modest fee, around $30, they will add a skinny bundle, okay? So from a price standpoint, there's a difference. There is a difference also sometimes, which is not in favor of the skinny bundles, that sometimes there's no DVR capability, sometimes there's no cloud storage capability, sometimes there's a limited number of televisions in the home that can be serviced with the skinny bundle. But all of that is in work now and being remedied as we speak. There are a number of differences there, but at the end of the day, it's the same, ABC, CBS channels, it's the same stream. The consumer doesn't care if they receive it via satellite, or if they receive it over broadband, unless it's buffering.
Yes,
Well,
and that's
gonna be the big difference.
the
Quality.
Yeah.
Two of our customers for our traditional platforms, that is Bell Canada and TELUS, just recently rolled out skinny bundles with a whole new service. Both of them rolled out, again, based on our platform, targeted at that segment. And the difference is that they're doing it at the same quality levels as their main pay TV. So that means, the 5.9 expectation of reliability, the zero buffering, the high quality delivery all the time, no pixelation, all that instant channel change, all those pieces.
but it's interesting. That's why Dish Air is an interesting solution.
Yes.
Unfortunately, which is Dish Air has a ATSC 1.0, unfortunately, receiver in it. So you're not paying for over the air. I mean, this is what's amazing to me. Most people don't know. You are paying When you have a cable subscription, which how many of MVPDs, like 90%? You're paying for the free-to-air TV, because the MVPD has to pay for
At a
it.
lower bit rate.
Yeah, right, at a lower bit. Exactly. You just hit my next point, which was when my beautiful old, sorry, Nick, Samsung 720p set.
So you said Samsung, he's fine.
When I switch from cable to over the air, I notice the quality difference, and then it hangs as a plane flies overhead. But that is an interesting possible way of skinnying up the bundle.
Just to counter a couple of things that, a counterpoint to a couple of points here. One is that the skinny bundles, there is a difference between skinny bundles and over-the-top delivery, right? So over-the-top delivery versus satellite versus a wired option, we actually did measure the difference in utility by age range for that, and not surprisingly, wired and internet for 18 to 24-year-olds roughly the same. But in 55 plus, there's an enormous gap in utility that wired is much more preferred, internet's way down, and it is because of the quality problems. Satellites below both of those for everybody. But millennials are actually, it turns out, not the ones that end up being most attracted to fewer channels at a lower price. To your point earlier, Josette, that 25 to 34-year-old age range is actually the least price sensitive when it comes to live TV channels. The most price sensitive are the 55 plus. So you put some of these offers out there, and older subscribers will adopt them. They'll trade down because they watch fewer channels. They say they must have, their number of must-have channels is fewer. And then one last thing I wanted to say is that most of the skinny bundle offers that have been introduced in the U.S. at least are not a particularly good value. They're low price, but they're generally comprised of the channels that have the highest affiliate fees relative to consumer willingness to pay. So if you look at those offers compared to a typical pay TV offer, has many channels, and a lot of those are ones that people really like. So there's a challenge in, we haven't found too many skinny bundles that actually work. So in terms of consumer adoption.
Right, because the consumers basically want their channel, right? They want few channels, they want to pay
But their
a
channel.
small, but they want their channel of choice, and their channel of choice is not
Yep.
necessarily their
And-
neighbor's channel of choice.
And across genders, 25 to 34-year-old men versus women, if you have both genders in the household,
Very different.
their top 30 channels, more than a third of them are not in common. So ESPN was number one for men, not even in the top 30 for women. So hard to
Amazing.
make it.
And that's one of the more expensive ones for the MVPD to carry.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I see a question already, and so we'll break here, but you can tell this is just going to be an amazing discussion. I can see an hour and 15 minutes is going to fly by, and it's
Should
going
be
to be
saying
like.
that outside so you pull
So, yeah, exactly.
Come on,
So let's, we'll stop, we'll answer this question if anybody else has, and just to kind of keep it somewhat orderly, maybe every 10 or 15 minutes, I'll sort of look around. If anybody kind of pops your hand up, then that'll be like, okay, I'll get to you. So, is that fair enough? All right, go for it.
You were talking about NBC Nightly News, and I watch it every day on my laptop. And the thing I find amazing about it is that they don't cater at all to that audience. They'll have the same exact commercial over and over and over. Like, every second.
Yeah.
On the
Instead of like,
OTT service.
On the OTT.
And it's not Viagra, Cialis?
well, they're like-
That's what it is. I mean,
Well, no, now it's Netflix, which is.
Interesting.
Well, I think so, because that's a perfect
Interesting.
thing. But one of the things it does is it turns me off from wanting
Yes.
to watch that, because it's like, it's not
It's a-
advertisements that are catered to me, and it seems like
Yeah.
it's the opposite of what should be happening.
Yeah.
Because there you really know who's watching it, and you know it's for
But-
typically.
That
But
ad
we-
market, the
this is-
biggest problem is the ad market isn't really developed.
Yeah,
for
well,
that.
So who wants to explain why that's happening?
No, because it's I'm
Yeah.
just channeling my panel from this morning.
Yeah.
That is very difficult to do.
Yeah.
It has been the golden chalice of advertisers and content providers is to be able to target. You were there, you remember the discussion. It just turns out to be extraordinarily difficult because it's usually lagging behind. The example was it's watching you, right? So it wants to provide the commercials you're interested in, and you go out and search for insurance and then buy it. It doesn't know that you've bought it, generally speaking, because that's a closed transaction. You're then going to get bombarded by insurance commercials for the next month. It's just very hard to do that. I'm with you. I would love to see that because I can't stand watching commercials that have no interest to me. But apparently that is really, really hard to do.
But
You know,
not only that, they only show one type of
there's-
content, like
Right.
on Netflix.
because they haven't been able to get anybody else to buy time.
Yeah,
Actually-
it's because on the demand side, there just isn't, it's just not mature enough, really. And so it's an evolving market. It's changed a lot.
There aren't enough
But-
advertisers who
Yeah,
want
and
to
not-
buy that you
That slot.
on NBC Nightly News. You
But
know,
Ford
that-
is willing to put down and get that commercial 5 times in front of you. Why not?
Yeah, but
And there also is a CPM issue too. In some cases, there's not enough live streams to meet the obligations. And we hear that from our customers because we sell to all these platforms. And we've had them tell us just candidly, there's just, the CPMs are not there. A lot of times that's the issue.
Yep.
Right,
So,
but the point you raise is extremely right on because, especially with our millennials, right? Our millennials they want inherently to have the ability to click out of commercials, or
Yeah.
they want commercials that resonate with
relevant,
them,
yeah.
or they want to be offered choices, like give me 3 commercials and I click on the one that I want to watch, if that's the rigor, if that's part of your business model. So, but again, it's a combination that programmatic, which enables this, is not really widely used yet for the main campaigns, which is the CLS you were
Yeah,
talking
right.
about. It's still used a lot for remnant advertising, in spite of protests to the contrary. But give it another 3 years, and there's a whole generation of older executives, dare I say it, and from Madison Avenue, I'm not young myself, but okay, that is going to retire, and then those executives whose livelihood going forward will depend on serving the younger markets will pay attention to that, and will make the gamble that they will have higher CPMs and fewer constituents, therefore less revenue
Yeah.
for a while until this ramps up.
And
Yeah, and there was a great article in the New York Times last week, and I can't remember the name of the person they interviewed, but she's one of those new executives at the broadcaster who's driving a lot of change, and so it's worth looking up at. It was last week, New York Times. So.
Yeah.
And speaking of ads, on another difference with the over-the-top MVPDs is that not if they have a DVR and if it has sufficient storage, generally you cannot skip over the ads. You cannot fast forward over the ads unless you pay more. Like that's actually a model that's evolving. So it has a variety of differences relative to traditional, and combine that with potential repetition. That's another issue.
that's right. So, any other questions while we're paused here? Okay, let's move on. Okay.
It's something generally that you guys were talking about, it's like discoverability, because that's kind of the problem for all of us.
Yeah.
Like whoever can figure out how to make it ease of use,
Be the next,
discoverability.
be the next Bill Gates, yeah.
You know, right, it's like, I want to be that person's, heir to. So how are you, each of you have a different entry point into that situation from being the TV, the set provider to, the different things you do. So I'm curious, how do you address discoverability? What are you doing to get there?
Well, I'll sound like a repeat, but it's personalization. So
Personalization.
it's about because our infrastructure for an operator, or whether they're a traditional operator or they're a new sort of style operator, it's that infrastructure collects so much data all the time. It knows how to analyze it and give the insight so you can segment, and then allows you to be able to personalize it, sort of identify those people, give them the interface that is appropriate for them, and make sure that it's driven with enough data and new, fresh things, so that way they can put it in front. That's our approach, at least be able to create that vision of the personalized TV. I think it will take a while for it to be great or amazing, but I think it's a lot better than it has been in the past.
So technically speaking, it's with us, what you're describing. Your company does it, and other companies are doing it too. But in actual fact, there are still hurdles to doing that, and a hurdle that you might not even think about. So again, some of the focus group that we ran with, again, specifically on millennials, have told us that millennials don't like to be stalked by things that advertisers think they want, right? Just because they've done something, they've clicked on something, or because they happen to be watching something, that lends itself to a diaper commercial or whatever. So there is a fine difference between stalking the consumer and serving the data that they want to see. So there are philosophical issues there that also come into play.
From my perspective, because I do standards legal work, very boring, but it's necessary. The wonderful thing about standards, there's so many to choose from. And that's part of the problem here, is getting the metadata in a standardized form. So, I mean, people want to hold on to that. It's not that you want to let people necessarily get that so they can draw your customers away, your viewers away, but getting the metadata in one place, in one format that works. I mean, you could get, they're bad standards too, they just don't go very far. That's a big barrier, is getting all that data in a place and then designing the tools that can go in and discover for you, or personalize for you. That's pretty tall mountain to climb. I mean, Josette seems to be a little optimistic we'll get there in 3 years.
Well,
I hope so.
3 to
No, I
5
hope
years,
so.
There's going to be some significant change, I
Yeah,
think.
I hope so.
And if the fragmentation continues, though, the issue is, all right, I may have a managed service from Ericsson, but then as a consumer, I might also be using Netflix, Hulu, and having discoverability work across these apps.
Yes.
And then they all have different navigation user experiences. So one trend, and I think it's a really smart trend, is that, you know, Comcast is an example, has incorporated Netflix into its guide. And I can, at home, with my voice remote, I can say House of Cards, and it will show me the different ways I can watch House of Cards, and on whether it's Netflix or Comcast. So, you know, ultimately bringing that consumer experience into one unified platform is great. Now, for various reasons, certain players won't do that, and because they want to have their own differentiated user experience, but that's a trend that's happening.
But there, Jonathan, you know what you want to find.
Good
As
point.
opposed-
Well,
as
but
opposed to-
you can also now, they keep improving it, and you could say, show me some comedies.
Yeah.
So, it does have the potential of being increasingly adapting and personalized to the consumer.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that's so right on, I think, from my perspective too, that MVPDs have a fantastic opportunity to partner more with OTTs, a la what Comcast has done, and to be that one portal of entry for video services, thus reclaiming the consumer and reattaching the consumer, whether it be through a skinny bundle or whatever, but at least, you know, they're holding the consumer, not just via broadband, but via video services. And I don't think that this is worked out enough among your clients.
Yeah, I agree, but though there's been a huge amount of change over the past 5 years in terms of the operators looking, do we fight or do we embrace? And
Right.
most of them are in the brace, and they're going to all be in the embrace pretty soon, camp. And, and then there's other, let's even go beyond just like the OTT alternatives. For example, TELUS, their skinny bundle service is based on an Android TV box from Google.
Right.
Okay, so which has those OTT services in there. When you do a search using their TV app, it comes up with the Netflix result or the Hulu result, depending upon if you've added those apps onto that Android TV box in there. And so now they're embracing an even larger world for it. So I think you'll see a lot more of that. And because they're realizing, as you said, is that their opportunity here is to be that trusted partner to the consumer, saying, I'm going to bring this to you. You have one phone call to, if you have problems. We'll make sure that your network is good. We'll make sure all the stuff is there. If you want to change your bundles, you can change them. That's fine.
Right.
That's their opportunities to do that.
And we'll upsell your broadband connection.
Exactly. I said, oh yeah, you need a gig, didn't you?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, you can't guarantee that you're going to be living in a region where you have a progressive MVPD that has all of these voice search capabilities, et cetera. So, from a TV manufacturer's perspective, we look at, whatever your MVPD is, the last 65 inches, if you like, of a TV set. So the TV set, the smart TV, certainly the ones we make, which have Google Search built in, and the Android platform, we're able to offer all of those capabilities, searching Netflix, meta search across Netflix and all the other OTT services, as well as your broadcast TV.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was at a Sky event last fall, and they they presented, for those that aren't familiar, I mean, Sky, a very large satellite provider in Europe, UK, and some other countries, and they presented very plainly that they have OTT offer, they have satellite offer, and they have hybrid offer, and that their view is they have a range of price from 19, like 19 pounds, I guess, up to, whatever it was, 140 pounds, so the full range. And it's really amazing. They have a Roku box with an over-the-air antenna that I think that's their $19 service. And it was really pretty amazing. It was an integrated solution, very low cost, that gave this, this sort of cohesive one input, one remote control. Was it the absolute stunning, amazing quality? It was extremely watchable. And it was very affordable. So I think we're going to see this, these MVPDs are aggressively moving in this direction of these hybrid, services. And I would love to jump into, we've been talking a lot about millennials and kind of the attitudes, and yet I've heard some kind of conflicting or maybe not so intuitive research on even like price sensitivity on channels and cost of access, and I set up that question. The reason why I asked what's really the difference between watching on Sling ABC and watching, because sometimes I think that kind of gets lost. Like everybody wants OTT, but well, if they're watching what I can get on Comcast, then what's the what do they really want? Maybe it's cost, maybe it's savings. But the question for the panel is. And let's just kind of go down the line on this one. I don't normally do that, but Nick, I'll start with you and just go down the line. Should we be designing new entertainment experiences? Should we be looking at certain demographic groups, or is that wrong? Because I know there's some that say, oh, the millennials, they're demanding these new experiences, and yet I'm hearing research that 55 and older are the ones who are actually a little more likely to take a Sling bundle and cut their cable package. So I'm just curious. So Nick, start with you, and we'll go down the line.
Yeah, I think it's good business sense to know who your customer is before you make a lot of investment into developing something, whether that's a piece of hardware or a network service or a movie or a TV show, whatever it is. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to know your customer very well. At the same time, the proof of those theories is actually in the market. You can't necessarily get it right just by reading the demographics that you're targeting to. Targeting by definition is kind of throwing something towards the target. You don't actually know that it's going to hit the target until you've done that and pulled the trigger. So it certainly makes a lot of sense to have. I'm not in charge of PlayStation Vue, but now we're talking about skinny bundles. Clearly that, just from the very name of it, that was designed as a virtual MVPD that is targeting a certain type of customer, people who own PlayStations.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'll partly actually go back to one thing that Giselle, you said earlier in terms of where we're in a very fractured place right now in time. And to me, that says that not only do you need to know your customer, but you need to be able to have a platform that can adapt to it. You need to be able to be dynamic and be able to test things out and see, did I hit the target or did I not? Was the target worth hitting or was it not? And then be able to have something you can change and experiment and be able to do that. But again, do it in a quality way, a high quality way, because that's what's being demanded now. Get away from those, the bufferings, the macro blocking, all that horrible thing, live channels delayed by several seconds, so your neighbors scream when the goal is scored and you didn't see it yet, things like that. So I think that's an important piece.
Right. Yeah, so definitely, I totally agree with that. So what I see as a solution is really a series of concurrent offers, which tends to be where the industry is going, right? So to address the cord cutting and the cord shaving of the younger generations, which, by the way, is real according to our research. Sorry, Jonathan.
Oh, no, it's real.
Battle of the research.
Don't apologize, we see it too.
Right, okay, so anyway, but to address that, the skinny bundle offers, including PlayStation View, which is a very robust and very nice service, we have it, by the way. So including that, I mean, it's fantastic because it's bringing in or retaining some consumers, so it's a defensive and offensive strategy. So it's retaining those consumers that were about to disconnect, and probably some of them are boomers, just as your research indicates. We haven't done much research with boomers. But with the millennials, what's happening, and sorry to return to millennials, but they actually, they get back into cable, or they go from cable never to cable subscriber via skinny bundle, and then the operator has a chance to upsell them into a much bigger bundle, and that tends to happen quite a bit. So perhaps I'm betraying that Jonathan's research is actually more, akin to what we do after all, because it does indicate a certain price elasticity even with that demographic. But it's that kind of strategy. But it's also bringing a world that is extremely muddy, where everybody's in everybody else's business. OTT's in the MVPD business, and the MVPD's in the OTT business. At the end of the day, you will see how this will engineer itself and how this will settle itself finally. And I put it to you that the content companies that own the high-value content will be the ones that stay seated on their chairs when the music stops, because they will always have players to whom they can license their product. And they are in a formidable place right now in terms of opportunities.
Well, it's interesting because I essentially agree and disagree with everything that's been said.
Okay.
Well, look, millennials are the biggest audience now. And boomers have to face it. They're no longer the dominant force in terms of a market. And millennials are coming into salaries where they can afford to pay for stuff. I like Nick's analogy of targeting. It isn't you just pick up the gun and fire it. It's hard for me to believe I was actually trained as an infantry officer. Fortunately, I never had to use the training.
Wow.
But you would sight your gun. I mean, you would try to hit the target, but you knew you wouldn't. You'd had to change the sights on it. There's a lot of that, I hate the analogies, but it's a good one. Is you got to know where your target is. I mean, if you don't know where your target is, doesn't matter how many rounds you go firing, you'll never know that you're getting close or not. And I think that one of the things that I complained at a recent conference about, they were all talking about why this is a Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, and we had a great technical conference. It was great. But there wasn't a millennial in the audience. They're all talking like this sort of thing. And I said, where are the millennials? And I think that's one of the things we've got to work on panels is at least hearing them, because it always reminds me of why I say I'm there and not there. In the Isaacson book about Steve Jobs, Isaacson says, why don't you use focus groups? And Steve goes, focus groups? Why would I use a focus group? People don't know what they want. I know what they want, and I give it to them. So there is some of that, too. It's very hard. I mean, we all are, I'm not in this predicting business. That's why I'm having fun. But these people, they've got to figure it out to make their companies or their research valuable, their companies to succeed. And it's hard. But I think you've got to focus on the target and try and see how you get your content so they want it, whether it's skinny bundles or whether it's OTT. So I think we've got to focus on the target.
Yeah, there's nothing more important in strategy and marketing than understanding who your target segments are and finding a way to meet their needs better than your competitors do. So one of the, and I could repeat a lot of things that people said, but one interesting segment that's underserved right now is the segment that doesn't like sports at all or doesn't care about sports at all. And actually that is the most interesting sort of, it's not a skinny bundle, but it's an affordable bundle when you don't include all those channels that have those very high affiliate fees because of sports, usually. So we could definitely see, and it's been in the press, we could definitely see combinations of channels and networks that that don't have sports but are at a much more affordable price points, still with many channels. There are, content licensing issues there, but there's certainly, if someone targeted that segment, they could have a very high take rate on an offer like that.
The problem is if you stop carrying ESPN, you don't get Disney Channel.
Right, you don't get
Yeah.
ABC.
Right,
So, yeah,
right.
so
No,
it's the-
you know, even without the rest of the Disney channels,
Yeah.
Or ABC.
offers could do.
Or
Yeah,
ABC.
ABC too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you lose.
Well, look at Netflix, right?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine something that had lots of channels that
Yeah.
were entertainment oriented.
That's right. Well, let's shift the conversation into a little bit more of a technology or distribution discussion. And I want to set this up, and Jim, this is your this is your moment in the spotlight. But we're talking about streaming, and we're talking about mobile devices, and we're talking about all of these alternate ways to access content. So the way that I certainly, and that we see this, and our customers see this emerging, business models, is a lot of it is really, and I was sort of trying to make the point. I was making a point. Maybe it wasn't done well. That whether you're watching ABC streaming or over a QAM segment to a set-top box, it's ABC. It's, so the distribution method doesn't matter, but what does matter is that if I have to watch it over a QAM segment, over an Ericsson infrastructure to a set-top box, I'm stuck in my house. If I'm able to take that, then, so there's a real, however, there's this thing about bandwidth and the cost of distribution. Now, if I'm on a mobile network and if I'm not a T-Mobile customer, I have to think about this, right? Because I'm paying. Now, of course, a lot of, T-Mobile's really disrupting with their unlimited data and all this. So,
Although
but.
they throttle you after 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. But so the reason why I said I'm teeing up Jim here is that network neutrality, if we were doing this panel, which we were doing this panel actually 4 years ago. In fact, I remember a evening session where it was a knockdown drag out over network neutrality that you were moderating, Jim. That was, I think you remember that one.
Oh, I
at the
remember well. I
Ritz.
still have the bruises.
This was
Where are we today?
this was amazing.
Get an update.
So, and now we have a new FCC chairman who, they're rolling it back. They have the votes to do that. There's views on both sides. This is not going to turn into a political discussion by any means. It's not the purpose of bringing it up. But this is highly relevant because there were concerns. Even T-Mobile was challenged with binge on. And if any of you, if I'm a consumer, that was pretty awesome. So regardless of my political views, it's like, wait a second, you're going to tell me, I can't, if they want to offer me free access, free data or unlimited data, that they can't do that. So, Jim, maybe you can bring us up to date.
I will try. This is where I get to say, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you.
So let's keep,
By the way, if you want a longer, better explanation, go online to John Oliver, Network Neutrality. He's great. So depending on which side of this battle you're on, the FCC released what's called a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. When they want to change the rules, they have to issue a notice and ask for public comment. We'll get back to that later. So the title of it, in the majority opinion, is Restoring Internet Freedom. The title of it in the dissent is Destroying Internet Freedom. So I'll try and briefly go back to tell you what the FCC did back those 4 years ago in response to our great debate.
Yeah, that's right.
Was the problem is their regulatory authority under the statute. This is all built around 30s law, essentially. Even though it's been updated, it thinks of the public switch network, common carrier, who can be regulated in price and services and all sorts of things. Early on, the FCC had said, well, internet services are information services because the data is manipulated by the ISP. I'm not sure that phone calls aren't manipulated today, but we don't need to go there. And so what the FCC said, we're concerned about the choke point of the ISP. So they said, well, we're going to have 3 bright line rules which say that MVPDs, cable operators, cannot block consumer access to the internet for legal content, of course. They can't otherwise degrade consumer access, and they can't engage in paid prioritization. I should have done my slide with the racing cars, meaning saying that, okay, your service is great, you're paying us something for it, so we're going to give you the fastest possible service. Your service, on the other hand, you're not paying us anything, we're going to just slow you down. We're not going to, or give you the irregular speed. Also, prohibit interference between edge providers and consumers. Edge providers is the OTT services. And finally, prohibit using interconnect agreements also to interfere with consumer access. A bunch of reasonable rules. Well, the majority now, the Republican majority, says that's a bad thing. And I tell people there's, accidental lies, little white lies, plain ordinary lies, bold-faced lies, and statistics. And so the chairman says, immediately after, you don't like where I'm going, I don't like his reasoning. Well, that's what I'm about to say, so let me tell people his reasoning. He says, as soon as the network neutrality order was issued by the former commission, CapEx investment dropped precipitously. Well, there's two problems with that, or three at least, probably more than that. One, that's not causation, that's correlation. You know the difference between causation and correlation? I stubbed my toe and it rained. That must be what made it rain. No, it's a high pressure and a low pressure with a temperature gradient and a moisture, that's causation. So he just said it happened. Well, the problem also is CapEx isn't a good indicator, and probably Jonathan can tell us more about that than I know, of investment, because it didn't include all the spectrum they bought, they invested in. And also, if you look at an earlier period of regulation, there really isn't much difference. And also, finally, when a company has to talk to its shareholders about its business, they're under SEC prohibitions, you don't lie. And every single one of the MVPDs said on their public record, meh, no big deal, not going to affect our investment, not going to affect us at all. So Mr. Pai, Chairman Pai, is forging ahead to dismantle this and go back to trying to regulate a light touch regulation, which is a problem because if it's not classified as Title II, a common carrier, the courts have already twice told the commission they can't regulate that way.
That's right.
So I think, I'm sorry to have gone on a little bit. Oh, by the way, John Oliver, to comment, and it's open to the public, you all are free to comment, you have to know how to get through 3 different screens to get to something which is not obvious where you comment. So John Oliver bought the domain Go FCC Yourself. Takes you right to the comment page. So if you guys want to comment, just go fccyourself.com.
That's pretty funny.
So now if I
didn't know
haven't
that.
confused everyone thoroughly, I'm willing to take questions.
He's already cherry picking the comments. We have very good evidence.
Oh, yeah.
Sending it out extensively to.
So,
Yeah, and oh, by the way, the study that they cite, it's interesting, when Chairman Pai was in the minority, he said, we should never do a regulation until the FCC economists have analyzed it. The FCC economists are not analyzing it, and the study he refers to is by, it has Freedom in their name, I forget it, but basically it's funded by the MVPDs.
yeah. So why this is, so of course there's probably questions about some of the, the public policy elements and all, but staying consistent with what the purpose of the panel is, I would like to get reaction and comments, and Jim, from you and everyone else, because the issue is this. So the telcos are all building and launching, and with AT&T, DirecTV Now, right, is just one example. Really great. It's going to be 100 channels, and it looks like it's going to be a really awesome package. Now, if that's going to be free for me as an AT&T subscriber, and I'm speaking of the data, not the content, but the data, that can, that might shift kind of the balance of, we're talking again about economics and cost, and yet previously under network neutrality, it was a little bit unclear, and and I know the previous chairman had kind of made neutral to no comment statements, right, Jim, about whenever somebody would say, wait, you can't do that, and well, we're not sure, but now it's going to be perfectly acceptable. So now, what does that do to competition? And what does that do for these new services?
I mean, that's where I get ambivalent here.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that they could throttle a competing service.
Right.
When you say ABC is online, that worries me. Pay prioritization worries me when there isn't competition.
Right.
I mean, on the other hand, I used to be an administrative lawyer. I taught administrative law down at UVA Law School for 10 years. I know administrative law. They don't do a very good job of regulating either. And I worry about heavy-handed regulation, but the answer, which is a tough answer, is competition. That's why I'm a little bit maybe too boyish about 5G. If we could have competition, that you didn't have just one carrier. I was so excited because Verizon brought fiber to the top of my street and said, here, sign this and we'll dig up your yard. I could go for it. 3 years later, I'm still waiting for, and so I'm stuck with one MVPD or satellite.
Yeah.
So competition to me is the real answer, and that's hard to get there from here.
There's an overall trend here of video being used as a sweetener or a differentiator for other revenue streams. So for a while, it used to be that cable operators just had video, and then broadband came along and telephone service came along, right? So
Security and now IoT.
Yeah, right.
and as a result, because they had that other revenue stream, most of them, the prices of what they pay for the content have been growing. I think it's 8 to 10% a year, but what they are able to charge for it growing 6 to 8% a year. So the costs have been going up and up for video, and the players that have another revenue stream, like Amazon has commerce, YouTube TV, or YouTube in general with Google has advertising as a way of monetizing the eyeballs from video. There's broadband, there's wireless. It's going to be a challenge for players that don't have another revenue stream where video is subsidizing something else, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. It's the video. If you're solely a video provider, the margins have gone away.
Absolutely.
And the content is just ever increasing more than consumers are willing to spend. So that's why you have to have some adjacent businesses that can help support it. Either that, or we find a way to be able to economically deliver something that's more specific to the individual, where you can fracture those costs down a little bit.
So we've also done some research directly with our sponsors, and some of them are large MVPDs, as I mentioned before, who actually have a broadband network as well as an offer of video services. And without naming who said that, we've had some comments like, well, we are looking at divesting video services altogether in a manner that video services are currently brought to market. So what would remain after that would be more like acting as a facilitator, as a distributor, like a content delivery network for companies, and companies might offer their own bundles directly to consumers, like you could envisage a Viacom bundle or a Disney bundle and all that. So it's really turning the proposition onto its heels, having basically content companies, instead of being paid to be carried, paying an operator to be carried. Now, what that does with that totality, I don't know, but I mean, it is certainly being studied now that, as Jonathan stated, there are other revenue streams, IoT being a very fast-growing one, for instance. So again, we are in this very interesting universe of musical chairs.
Okay, I see a question. Yes.
Based on your research, what has been the price point affordable and willing for age group 18 to 25 and 25 to 35, based on your research?
The thing is that it depends. There's price elasticity, and there's no at this price demand surges or whatever. It does. It's very elastic. So if you can price video services lower, demand does go up. But then the question is, well, what combination of channels is that, and what value are you delivering to consumers? So it's we've got a whole bunch of demand curves for various offers at various price points, but there's not one sort of magical price point that's going to create a lot of demand.
Get a sense how many channels that everybody had in that?
Sure, I'll tell you. So here it is. I had it up here in case. So this is self-reported average number of channels watched by age range. 18 to 24, 14, 25 to 34, 21, that was the most. 35 to 44, 19, 45 to 54, 16, 55 plus, only 14. So it goes down with older audiences. And then the number they said they must have, now we had other ways of measuring willingness to pay, but just almost on a binary basis, how many channels did they say they must have? The 25 to 34-year-olds had 42, so that was double the number that they say they watch in a typical week, which makes sense because some channels I might only watch during a season when a favorite show is on or a favorite team is playing or whatever. And generally the number of must-haves is double the number that they say their household watches in a typical week. But actually older audiences, consumers rather, 55 plus, they watch 14, they must have 20, so much lower. And that's why I was saying earlier that 25 to 34-year-old age range is kind of the sweet spot of pay TV.
It's the sweet spot. It's the overall sweet spot.
But this was, we asked how many channels does your household watch in a typical week? And it was a open response. And then we took them through, so the must-haves, actually, the way we did that, we had 150 different channels that we asked about in the survey. And then they chose either must-have, somewhat interested, or not interested for all 150.
Could you read through those one more time?
I'll just, give me your card, I'll give you anyone who wants it, I'll send it to you.
So we've done some research as well. So our research is slightly different. In terms of what the yield was. So these were focus group comprising 8 groups of 10 millennials aged 25 through 34, in blended demographics, not all MBA students at USC, which would put them in a very special demographic, so very, very slanted, really. So basically, we asked the question differently because this was on the heels of those millennials saying how allergic they are to advertising the way it's currently being served. So we said, well, are you willing to pay to get content that is advertising free? And if not, how much would you be willing to pay? And so the majority, 72%, said they would be willing to pay $30 per month and already are. And typically that comprises at least two OTT video services. So.
Sorry, in your research, did it include Netflix or other OTT channels that are bundled?
We asked about Netflix, but this was very specifically about the live TV offers.
I'd like to know, in LA and New York, we tend to have certain segments where it's easy to see that, OTT, this is, everyone's doing it. I'd like to know in your research, are there any differences in these age groups, both geographically across the country as well as socioeconomically?
Good question.
Yeah. Generally, what we've seen is that more rural markets, local channels are a lot more important, and it's hard to pick out, what is it rural, is it lower income, is it age, because all of those things tend to be associated with rural markets. But the local channels, the news coverage is much more specific to, and they'll have like a 24/7 coverage of a certain market, and that's really valuable information. If you're in New York City and you're watching New York news, then there's lots of ways to get that news, right? So, but we also found people more price sensitive in rural markets as well.
On that $30 price, are there studies to show that, that we can provide this bundle profitably at that, or?
No.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like.
It's not enough. It's not enough to displace the advertising value.
That's what I was.
Right. No,
Plus-
that was our conclusion as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. It's way too tenuous to make up for the advertising revenue that would have been
Yeah.
served. If you envisage 30 channels stripped of advertising, there is no
And-
way that
yeah.
$30 per month would.
Is it, Is there a number that's?
It's about equivalent, so the subscription revenue is about equal to advertising revenue,
So they would have to charge $60 a month, twice.
or 140.
Yeah, well, we haven't actually run those numbers, but yeah,
Oh,
a factor, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, 3 times probably.
oh, $90.
Yeah, yeah.
Something like
Yeah,
$90, 100, yeah,
Yeah.
per household, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Actually, I had a question.
All right. Hey, panelists, questions?
Question, there we go. Back to, you mentioned PlayStation View. So that's not, is that available on the Bravia televisions? Do you make
Absolutely.
it available?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, in fact, it's the only, Bravia TVs are the only, currently at least, the only smart TV that has PlayStation View built into it. But not just PlayStation View, we have Sling TV on Bravia as well.
And it's very good quality, I might add. PlayStation View.
Thank you. And I mean, it's very natural for somebody with a smart TV to subscribe to these skinny bundle services. I mean, some of the packages in, particularly in PlayStation View, are not particularly skinny. I mean, you can get quite a lot of, pretty much replace your entire cable lineup. You know, it's very important for a service like PlayStation View to have a diversity of devices that they work on, because, you know, unlike a cable company, they're not distributing boxes into, you know, 2.4 or 3.5 home rooms in your home. They're relying on the customer themselves having those devices. So it's important for these skinny bundle services to be on as many different devices as possible, and that's another expense of developing these skinny bundle services, is building 10 to 15 different versions of the app to be on all these mobile and home devices.
Yeah.
That's the other ugly FCC thing, is the set-top box, which is going to die. I mean, it's a real, again, I have these ambivalent feelings. Basically, what the FCC had been ordered by Congress in 1998
96.
to separate the box from the service so that Sony could come up with a box. The problem is, unlike, this worked very well, and you're mostly too young to remember, when they deregulated the telephone industry. And, you know, 1,000 flowers bloomed in terms of all of a sudden the phone you were renting, the plain black phone you were renting for $20 a month became $15 at your pharmacy. So the idea was to do that for cable TV. The problem is, from a high level, is technically different cable companies have different standards.
Yep.
And so it caused a real problem. The FCC struggled with this for years. This administration is just letting it die. It's truly unfortunate, because I always sort of thought that the ideal place would be to separate the screen from the box and have Sony boxes that are really high quality. But the screen you spend a lot of money on, and it's a good screen. You'd replace the box a lot quicker than you'd replace the screen.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen anyway because of
You do?
know
Good.
because of
Oh, yeah, I agree.
the internet and apps and all these trends. All of that kind of pushes the set-top box concept into the past.
Pushes it out.
so-
Yeah, it's true.
Cool.
The security industry has been changing a lot over the past few years, and they're now coalescing on something that will, make it pretty easy to be able to do. And all the TVs, whether it's
Yeah, 'cause-
Bravia TVs, they have the hardware to trust, which allows you to be able
Yep.
to have that premium level.
Right,
content and everything
right.
like that,
No, it's-
and be able to have that control.
I
So,
just didn't realize it was moving into the TV side.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the standards that varies today from distributor, cable operator security system.
That's right. Well, looking at the time, it looks like we have maybe one more quick question, otherwise we'll wrap up. So we have time for, okay, all right. If no one else has one, go for it. Sure.
So I'd like to hear from the panel. Imagine that buffering wasn't an issue. Let's say we had great pipes over the internet, we could get it really, really well. How do you see things like Chromecast or Google TV playing an active role? Because now you like CNN is live, ABC is live, Hulu is there, lots of content on YouTube. If I just can get it on my computer and I can cast it on my TV, why that, is it a future that we have to opt for, or is it, how do you see it different? I know that people want to play in different worlds, but let's say if the buffering wasn't an issue to begin with.
Yeah, I think buffering, it's definitely far less of an issue now than it used to be. I think this concept of casting, I mean, we have Chromecast built into all the TVs that we sell. It's a great concept. I think where it fits, at least from our viewpoint, is if you have a mobile app already, but you're not quite ready to build a smart TV app, because that's an additional level of investment and effort and expertise and maintenance. If you don't quite want to do that yet, then put Chromecast or something like it into your mobile app, and you can cast to millions and millions of sticks or TVs, or Amazon Fire TV has a similar kind of concept as well. So I think that's where casting fits in, but it certainly doesn't replace the convenience of having the Netflix app built into the TV set. So a certain TV manufacturer, who will remain nameless, started selling TVs that didn't have the apps built into them at all, but it had a kind of Chromecast in it. And I guess that TV company thought that, well, that's enough because everybody's just going to cast. Turned out that wasn't really an acceptable concept to a TV customer, and they've kind of reversed their strategy this year. So it's important, but it's not the whole picture.
But there is an interim solution to the buffering problem. It's called adaptive streaming. There's an Apple version and a rest of the world version, MPEG-Dash, where your device senses the bandwidth that's available. It may not be the best solution, but it's better than the picture freezing. What happens is you get a lower quality video for a while until the network bandwidth comes back up. Right. So you might drop from 1080p to 480p for a while, which isn't horrible. It's not what you want to have as an experience, but it's a lot better than all of a sudden the frame freezes and it starts churning around.
Yeah. But it goes beyond just the video. That certainly is the bit rate. The video quality is one thing in terms of just the visual quality, but it's also the reliability of it. Being able to, we see CBS in the Super Bowl broadcasts and how it kept on going off and off and not working and all those problems like that. How do you deal with those things? How do you deal with the delay between the system? There's huge end-to-end delays. I think Super Bowl was 10, 15 seconds.
Was it that?
No, it's 17 seconds. HLS is the fastest implementation is 17 seconds.
Uh-huh. So there's
that's the
huge
delay.
things, and to be able to do this at scale, at reliable scale, this is going to take a long time and big investments where to do it. I mean, it's probably less of a technology issue in terms of invention and more of a massive capital. And
it's even security and DRM, because you get into an issue with some content that is just token key encrypted. You can sling it and it's fine, and then something that has to be encrypted and it won't work. So now from a consumer perspective, those of us who are technical, it's annoying and we understand, but a consumer, it's like how it worked last hour, now it doesn't work. And this is exactly why the manufacturer you spoke of, great in theory, it doesn't work in real life. Okay, we are now 2 minutes over. Thank you so much. You've been a great audience. Please join me in thanking the panelists.